All right, we are live. Welcome to another session of Protocol Engineer Office Hours. This is Rick, joined by Joshua and, of course, our co-founder Max Sanchez. It's a lighter crew this week, as some folks are out, some are traveling. So, yeah. What
We won't have any lawn care discussions, unfortunately,
yeah,
unless Joshua wants to chime in.
both, probably both fortunate and unfortunate. But yeah, if you have any questions, specifically regarding technical aspects of the Hemi network or building, or if you have any questions about Hemi Arcade Season 2, you're interested in the builder role or beta testing, this is definitely the place to ask. So feel free to flood the comment session. This is not the place for when questions. That is midweek with Max. So, um, yeah, uh, let me
Yeah,
see.
not much else to add to that. For anyone joining us for the first time, this is just a chat for people to ask questions, anything they're working on engineering-wise related to the Hemi network, whether that's smart contracts, building anything that interacts with the Hemi network, Hemi daemons, anything specific to HVM or any of the other technologies we have in the chain. In particular, we're doing. We had previously done a what we called Hemi Arcade, which is a game building competition, and we're going to be running a new season of that. And so, if you're building a game, you have any questions about game design, want to think through any problems, any of that is more than welcome. So, somebody asked, "When Rick girlfriend?" That is off topic.
That is very off topic and has nothing to do with technical stuff or building, but the answer is probably never. So thanks user ZR5GE5XV4Z for bringing me down. Thanks, bud.
Happy Wednesday, Rick.
Happy Wednesday, you single piece of shit. Um, well,
Also,
take that,
probably
bitches.
never. I'm just going to copy Rick's homework. This is great.
Yeah, that's great. It's probably the first time that's ever happened. But yeah, if you got, we are not going to press E, Alex. But I mean, I guess we could.
We already tried that far too many times 2 weeks ago.
That's true. Uh, oh, here we go. Hold on. Don't know if this is related, but how soon should we expect the next Hippo? Have technical work for the VE Hemi upgrade been completed?
So the technical work's done. The smart contracts for the new rewards distributor are done. Uh, I'm hoping to get the Hippo out in the next few days here. The Hippo's covering two things. So it's covering the new thing that we're launching, which is just the new rewards contract, which has slightly different logic, fixes some issues people had with claiming rewards on positions that they had already withdrawn. So it's more of it fixes some bugs. It gives us more flexibility in rewards distribution for new different position types. It lets us do things that are hooked into governance. So that'll be part of the Hippo, and then the other part of the Hippo, maybe we'll separate it out. The current plan, as current drafts would indicate, the current Hippo is also going to contain some forward-looking plans for the new VE Hemi UI redesign and some of the new like epoch-based distribution schedule that we want to move to, which is related. If you were on Midweek with Max yesterday, the new UI that we were going through and demoing. So, short answer: tech piece for the current part we want to launch is done. The Hippo for that's being drafted, and it's probably going to also include that additional piece for the forward-looking, next steps that we want to do with VE Hemi, but are not implementing in this version of the upgrade.
All right. When reply to bug crowd P1 reports? That sounds fairly technical, I think.
We are working. We actually have a call today going through a lot of the bug crowd backlog. So we've been inundated with a ton of AI reports. Not that AI is bad for security research. There's a lot of good stuff you can do with it. But we've also got a ton of nonsense reports, like over 100. I'm not sure if it's over 200 at this point. So the backlog's big, but we are working through it. And also we are prioritizing reports related to anything that we have, running in production versus anything that maybe a, repo that's still in development or in, alpha or anything like that. So we are working through it though.
All right, let's see. I am not seeing any building related questions, but we've only been here for 5 minutes, so that's not bad. Let's see. Is there anything about? Oh, okay. Well, Joshua has a question, I guess.
So POR, this is all current thinking. So all of this could change. We're still trying to figure out what the best way to run the POR system is. So super high level, the goal is basically this. We've called it a couple different terms, but like protocol evergreen fund, and so basically a on-chain treasury of assets that the protocol owns, the protocol controls. Ultimately, the end goal is VE Hemi has control and say over how those funds are directed, and also over a stream of community incentives that the VE Hemi voters can collectively allocate. So sort of, spray the fire hose left or right or center for funding, new projects or projects that want to expand to the Hemi network as, developer grants and bounties, and then turn that into, contributions by that protocol back into this growing protocol revenue fund or protocol owned liquidity fund rather, and then a portion of the yield on that based on governance votes to be distributed to VE Hemi holders. So the challenge with building that kind of a system is, and we've seen DAOs in the past have this exact issue. So there's good case studies of what not to do. There's not a lot of good case studies of what to do, which means we have to be creative and come up with the right safeguards and structure for the system. But you can't just put a bunch of assets, a bunch of Hemi tokens and LP positions and whatnot in a treasury and then say VE Hemi voters can arbitrarily change anything about those and redeploy capital in any way that passes the governance vote, because then you just get a race to the bottom where somebody bribes all of governance. Say there's $1 million in the treasury, just as an example. Somebody pays 100 grand to bribe all of the VE Hemi holders to vote to give them the $1 million, right? And so it's kind of a degenerative case of on-chain protocols and protocol treasury management. So we're trying to figure out the right way to approach it. The standard sort of pattern is, and maybe this is something that we can start with and then figure out how to improve, but is a council that a security council, for lack of a better term, although it's, security is a bit of a stretch there. Usually that refers to more things like protocol upgrades, parameter changes, stuff like that. But you could have, for lack of a better term, a security council or a veto council that can go and veto any proposal that they believe is not in the community's best interest, but they can't make proposals. So you have this balance of power where the Hemi holders can vote on allocations and for a specific allocation, but there is a council that's able to say, hey, this is just taking all the money and giving it to Joe. We don't want to do that. So they can veto it and then force VE Hemi to revote on a new allocation strategy. So that's one model. It's not ideal because you still have that council in there. That's still a point of centralization, a point of failure. But it does have some nice properties, which is again, that balance of power where you don't have, one party who's able to unilaterally control it. You instead have, it's kind of like in the US government, Congress can pass bills, but the president can veto, and then Congress can override that with a certain threshold, a supermajority of votes. So you have sort of that same kind of architecture where you say VE Hemi holders are the only ones who can choose to make a change to the allocation. So the council can't step in and say, no, we're going to move all the liquidity to this sushi position or whatever. But you have this check and balance in the system where there's a party that can say, nope, this is a obvious attack against the system. through a bribe voting market or something, we're not going to approve it. In the future, that could be there's ways to potentially remove the security or the veto council. You can create designs where, say, for example, there's or you're not going to probably entirely remove it, but you can move it down a level where you can say the security council, VE Hemi votes on approving a new location where funds can go to. For example, hey, there's a new DEX on Hemi, or there's a new lending protocol on Hemi, or whatever, and we want to approve that as a valid place that funds can be parked. If VE Hemi voters choose to park funds there at any point in time, the Security Council can only veto the addition of a new protocol into the system, a la one that's malicious or buggy or has governance issues or whatever. But then once it's approved in the system, then VE Hemi holders have full carte blanche control over asset allocations between all of the approved locations and streams that those can go to. For things like directing governance incentives, those are a little less dangerous because it's a smaller amount, and generally, it wouldn't make economic sense. And I say generally, but it usually wouldn't make economic sense for somebody to, put a bunch of bribes in a market to get a small developer grant or bounty out of the system. They'd be paying close to or more than the value of the grant itself, so it doesn't make economic sense. And so those systems can be a bit looser, where you say, there's 1 million Hemi tokens of builder incentives this month. VE Hemi chooses how to allocate those, and based on proposals that people submit and say, hey, I want to build this thing, I need this many tokens, and I'm either going to give this percent of the governance token back to this protocol and liquidity treasury, or I'm going to redirect 20% of all the fees the protocol collects for the next year to the treasury or whatever. And there's ways that you can force that in code to some extent. At the end of the day, that is sort of trying to fit a legal agreement into a smart contract context, or what would traditionally be a legal agreement. And so, you can require, for example, that they pre-mint the governance token and then, do an atomic transaction that in one transaction is going to fund them with the developer grant, and then take, X% of the governance tokens from their contract, move to the treasury. But at the end of the day, it's humans in the real world. And so there's no promise that they're going to launch the protocol. There's no promise that they're going to, launch the protocol with the same governance token that they minted. And so you still need some, human in the loop or council, or, you can do things where only a portion of the incentives are given up front, maybe required for spinning up infrastructure, and then the rest are only given once VE Hemi holders approve that the protocol has been launched in a way that they expected, with the right incentives going back to the POL treasury. So it's a more complex problem than it sounds. It's not just VE Hemi controls a treasury and then everything's good, but we're trying to work through the ideal design for that. And I think for first version, just the veto council gets us there to something working, and then as we see how that evolves, how bribe markets evolve, things like that, then we can make adjustments and figure out sort of the ideal end structure for it.
All right. I think I know the answer to this question, but it's probably better coming from you, and you probably have a better explanation. Will there be any Hemi hackathon?
We definitely want to do one at some point. So the next big engineering sort of event is going to be the CTF that we're putting together. And the hope is, that's going to be, obviously it has some Hemi specific components. It's going to run on the Hemi testnet. It's going to have some stuff that uses HVM or is, Bitcoin adjacent. But the hope is to use that as a way to get new builders into the ecosystem, people who are maybe smart contract devs who want to try out their smart contract auditing skills and find bugs, or people working on, ZK applications who want to try to break a bad implementation of a ZK VM guest, or a solid guest in a ZK VM that has some sort of under constrained opcode in the RISC-V emulator or something like that. So the goal is do the CTF, use that as sort of a way to get more people in the community, more developers interested in what we're doing, familiar with what Hemi does, what we have at a protocol feature level, and then try to figure out how to do a hackathon with that new bigger group. So we do want to do one. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like. It'd definitely be a virtual event, at least the first one. Um, a lot of the hackathons that I've seen, they tend to be kind of these short sprints where people put together, something that's a cool demo or a proof of concept, and then a lot of times it doesn't really evolve into anything. So it's a fun community event. It's a good way for people to try building stuff and get feedback and sort of compete to build some cool proofs of concepts around, say, HVM or whatever the theme is of the hackathon. But a lot of times it doesn't really convert into, hey, the person who built this really cool thing in 48 hours is going to spend the next 2 months making it production grade and audited and launching it in production. So we do want to do one. I'm not sure what the exact structure is going to look like, but whatever we do, it will be after the CTF. We're kind of doing a hackathon with Hemi Arcade, but that's like a very targeted, gaming centric one versus like a DeFi application sort of hackathon.
For sure. And I mean, I think there's elements in the capture the flag as well that kind of
It's hackathon-ish, I guess.
it's hackathon adjacent, if you
Yep.
will. So,
It has
but
concepts
yeah,
of hackathon.
absolutely.
Notes of
But yeah,
hackathon.
so we have the CTF coming up. The target, please don't quote me on this, but the target is October for that. But before that, you will see Hemi Arcade Season 2 coming. We just got to solidify the. I think we're going to go theme this time, and we're going to change up the categories and reward system a little. And we'd like to, get more folks involved because it's actually Joshua pointed this out to me earlier. That's our highest performing video ever, and it's our longest live stream ever.
YouTube's notoriously hard to get views for this type of content. Like most people don't go and rewatch, a 4-week-old midweek with Max for good reason, understandably. But yeah, I think the Hemi Arcade content's a little more evergreen. It's kind of like it's entertaining. You get to see some games people built on chain. It's more of a long lived asset that stays relevant, I think, longer, which is cool.
Totally. And all the games were like super fun too. Um, I I, I still really enjoyed watching you play Blind Guy Simulator or whatever the hell it was called.
We had
Uh,
that was there were some interesting ones. We'll put it that way.
uh, what do we got? Oh, we got an alpha. Um, could you please clarify why the updates for the Hemi are experiencing significant delays in the timeline?
Ultimately, we're doing a lot of greenfield new development, so things take the time that they take, and whatever we're building, we're building really complicated, brand new protocols people haven't built before. So there's always stuff you didn't expect that you have to think through when you get to step 7 of 39 of building it. But also, you want to make sure that things are done right and not just throw out something to get something launched with bugs or issues or things that are going to create maintainability problems. Obviously, there can still be bugs. We're human, but we're focused on building things that are solid infrastructure people can work based off of, and we're not going to rush that out to try to meet some deadline. We're going to release it when it's ready and we feel confident in what we've built. So, and we're also just working on a lot of different things too. We have a relatively small team, and we're all experts in our own domain. Where it's a small but very high quality team. But we're working on just basic chain maintenance and like talking with partners and managing infrastructure and all of that takes up a surprising base amount of time where you're not really making any progress. You're just sustaining everything that you have, especially as you scale it to more partners who are running nodes who run into this configuration issue or need this snapshot or whatever. It all sounds silly, but all of that adds up. And then we also spend a lot of time with stuff that BD is bringing in. If they have new protocols that are launching on the chain, we're now doing. And again, this is an area of continued improvement, but code reviews and reviews on the deployment architecture of those new protocols that they're bringing to the chain. So there's a lot of that sort of administrivia type stuff that's just the base, weekly cost of running a chain. And then beyond that, as far as the stuff we're building, it's, a brand new Bitcoin ZK provability system running inside of and being made compatible with an existing EVM ZK proving infrastructure. HBit VM is a brand new protocol that touches consensus protocol design and game theory balances between them, ZK proving the multiple networks together in a cohesive way, balancing all kinds of complicated incentives between tons of different parties in the system. Doing things natively on Bitcoin. Bitcoin was not meant to do, and finding. And at this point, it's mostly engineering. There's not new things to figure out. It's all we know what to do, and it's a matter of building it, testing it, making sure it's solid. But things like that take a lot of creative workarounds. For example, we had to build a brand new version of proof of proof that works between Ethereum and Bitcoin, and then fold up ZK proofs of both of those networks through Hemi as an observation layer, just to be able to make Bitcoin be able to validate that a transaction on Bitcoin happened, which is on Ethereum, that would be a couple lines of a smart contract. With HBit VM, that is, 3 giant complicated moving components that are interrelated, have game theory implications on each other, and need to be orchestrated together in a observation layer with ZK proofs of entirely disparate systems that align based on not only what technically you can prove from Bitcoin to Ethereum state or Ethereum to Bitcoin state through Hemi and HVM and the precompiles, but then what limits you set and how you parameterize that protocol based on the relative worst case scenario of Ethereum, of legitimate Ethereum validator drop off or sustained network fragmentation, how that works in events where Bitcoin mining power drops significantly for a period of time for whatever reason. And so there's a versus on Ethereum, a couple lines of code to accomplish the same thing. So it's complicated stuff we're building, and we want to make sure it's solid and we're proud of it before we launch it, instead of trying to ship something that's, some limited version of what we want that's, curtailed or put in a small box and doesn't really do what it was meant to do. But it's, hey, we checked the box, or that we launched something that we haven't got thoroughly reviewed, audited, and made sure that it's ready for production.
The whole op-geth thing didn't help either. That's
that too, yeah. That's the other thing with running a chain, especially running a chain. Like, it's one thing if you built your own, brand new blockchain from scratch. It's an L1. It has its own consensus protocol, and it's, written in whatever language you want it written in, and great. Like, you control that end to end. That is a stack that, you every piece of it, and no part of it changes unless you change it or, your team changes it. Whereas with L2s, it's a much more complicated system because you have Ethereum protocol upgrades and compatibility with them. We're based on originally the Optimism architecture with all of our Bitcoinness added into it. And so there's even if you do nothing kind of to the maintenance point, there's an ongoing cost of Ethereum doesn't upgrade. Maybe it adds some features that you want, which is awesome. Maybe it's just an upgrade that barely affects you, but because some things are changed, you have to make a bunch of changes to be compatible with it. And so there's a lot of moving pieces and third-party code that you have to maintain and fit together and keep working. And to Rick's point with opgeth to opreth, the original plan was that the opreth fork would just be the ZK proven variant, so it would run in a very limited fashion. It wouldn't have peer-to-peer networking. It wouldn't have, you wouldn't be able to run it as a live daemon on the network. It would just be basically the state transition function for the Hemi network running in, Rust via, I say opreth, it's really downstream things that opreth uses, like the Rust EVM implementation that needs to be updated with the precompiles, things like that. But opreth, as we'll call it, just for simplicity. But it's supposed to be sort of this just jailed off version of you feed it a block to process and an extraction of EVM state. it processes a state transition function. Aha, we've ZK proven the state transition function with the new Hemi features like HVM and being able to call, which this is not simple because we had to build a whole ZK prover for Bitcoin anyway. Oxygen, that was already in development. But that's at least, this bounded offline problem of we have this node. It's not really a node. It is just the state transition function written in Rust. And then we can use that for ZK proving the same thing that opgeth is processing as a live daemon on the network. And with the deprecation of opgeth, then we had to switch to, okay, now opgeth is going to be the main officially supported daemon on the network, and it has to implement everything. And oh, look, it's missing a bunch of stuff that we think is required for a network to really function, like SnapSync. And so we got to add SnapSync back in, basically re-implement the entire SnapSync protocol that opgeth implements over in opgeth, because you can't have, the default state for syncing a node can't take, a month, right? And a lot of other projects get around that with snapshots. And, that is one model. And like for partners who want to spin up, say, a fully synced node, occasionally we'll do snapshots for certain partners, certain conditions. But that's not like the trust model you want for anyone to go and spin up a node and sync it. You also don't want them to take, a month, 2 months, a couple of years from now when the chain has a lot more state and there's more Bitcoin state to worry about. Could be, half a year to sync a node or something insane. And so we had to implement SnapSync just to have sort of the equivalent node running functionality that already existed in opgeth. Then we had to port all of the Hemi-specific peer-to-peer changes over to opgeth, over from opgeth to opgeth. We have to do a lot more battle testing because there's a lot bigger of a surface of things that can go wrong, because it's not just a contained state transition function. It is now an entire daemon with networking and databases and the potential for database corruption in certain scenarios that you need to take into account and worry about. We had to integrate TBC as a transition period that allowed us to move on to opgeth without moving fully onto Oxygen. So we had to write a Rust wrapper around TBC to maintain functionality to coordinate a network transition between the two daemons. And all of that is work that doesn't provide any features. It is just purely maintenance cost, basically.
All right. Let's see. Oh, got a couple good ones. I've been looking into the recent Hemi Arcade game contest. Aside from the contest rewards, are there any plans to offer Hemi grants to the winners so they can continue developing their games?
It's a good question. It's not something we've explicitly discussed. I think if there were, a lot of the Hemi Arcade games were, fun games to play, but not the kind of thing that you would turn into, and there are some exceptions to that, but a lot of them aren't the kind of thing you turn into like a full scale, game that somebody's going to maintain for years and run, and that's going to generate like a bunch of revenue for the person running the game. I think if there are game designs that fit that bill, we're definitely happy to discuss Hemi grants, just generally speaking, as somebody building something on chain that they want to, continue to build out and operate as like an actual, commercial thing on the chain versus, part of like Hemi Arcade and Hero Games and all that, which is tons of fun, but it's not like a full game protocol, if that makes sense. So definitely happy to discuss it. If there's people making games that are more, like just as a arbitrary example, if somebody built or wants to build, a like evolving generative on-chain MMO with an in-game economy and like, a lot of complex stuff, you're using a lot of blockchain technology in ways that make a lot of sense for the game and really align well with it. In cases like that, we'd be more than happy to discuss grants.
All right. Well, sorry to skip ahead, but on the same subject of grants, do you have a formal grant process, and what does that look like?
Not currently. It is something we want to formalize. We have not had the time to. We've had a couple starts of putting together like a formal program, and then it's like, well, it doesn't capture this piece, or it's what is going to be the criteria and who's going to be actually reviewing that and making these decisions. So we do want to formalize it at this point. It is very informal. It's just basically if you have an idea, either A, mock out like an MVP, and we're happy to review that and see where it fits into the ecosystem. Or if you want to, talk about something before you get started and commit any work towards it, you're welcome to reach out with basically a proposal of, hey, I'd like to build this. Here's where it fits into the ecosystem. Some things are obvious, like I have a new idea for how to do a more efficient DEX. Here's a brief, description of the idea. I want to build it on Hemi. That's obvious where it fits in. It's a DEX. It's more efficient in this way or that way. If it's something more esoteric, like I want to build a something that's not like its own standalone protocol, but maybe like I want to. I'm just making up examples, and this probably wouldn't be something for a grant at the moment, but maybe when we expand HVM. But for example, I want to build tooling for making development with HVM easier for this framework, or a remix plugin or something like that. Those kinds of things are less like self-contained projects with their own economics. Those are more like, hey, that'd be a cool thing to have for developers in the community. So those are all proposals for those are more than welcome. Those are probably lower priority, but still, if you find an interesting niche, like, I was trying to develop some stuff with HVM. Here's a problem I kept running into. I solved it for myself, and I want to turn this into like a library people can use, something like that. More than happy to have those discussions too. So right now it's not formal. We do want to make it more formal, but at the moment, basically, it's either send a proposal, or if you want to build out like a super simple MVP of what you want to build, send that to us, and then we can talk about grants and bounties from, how does it fit into the ecosystem? Is it, we don't need the, seventh clone of Uniswap, right? But are you doing something interesting and novel? It doesn't have to use Hemi's Bitcoin specific features. It can just be, I have a better idea for a DEX. I have a better idea for a lending protocol. I have a, interesting new cross-chain interoperability solution. I want to build this thing that plugs into in the future, the ZK marketplace in some interesting way and makes it easier for chains to do cross-chain payments and engage in that, right? So anything that's novel and fits a niche that's not already covered by existing things in the Hemi ecosystem, those are the most interesting, or anything that makes any tooling, stats, things like that, that are a net value add either to users of Hemi or people trying to develop on Hemi. Those are probably secondary, but still interesting. We'd love to discuss them.
All right. Let's see. What percent of Hemi new green code, like Oxygen, is AI generated?
A fair bit of it, but it's AI generated and then human reviewed. So there's it's not vibe coded. We're not going for vibe coding here. We're going for concrete plans, concrete testability, have AI write something that adheres to the spec that you defined, passes the test that you defined. I think we've talked, not sure if it was this or midweek previously, but one of the methodologies I like is writing a known set of test cases that the AI can use when actually writing the code, and then having it blind to another set of test cases that it has to pass, sort of like trying to think of the right analogy, but it's a way to basically say, prevent the AI from fitting the code to the tests. And then once it passes through that entire thing, then you go and human review the code and make sure it makes sense. So a fair bit of it is, the characters in the string are AI written, but it's coming from a human written, human reviewed spec. It's going through human reviewed, human specified test conditions with complicated things using that blinding method. And then the actual code at the end is human reviewed, if it's important, generally by multiple people before it actually gets merged in and pushed to production. And we're also using AI a lot for trying to proactively find bugs as well, which is a great use of AI that's purely additive. It's not writing code, it's just reviewing human written code and finding issues or bugs or optimizations that can be made to it. So that's been another large use of AI.
All right, Josh beat me to the punch. Reviewed by how many people?
Depends on the component and where it fits into the ecosystem. If it's something low risk, it can be just the person who's building that component. So if it's something that's trying to think of a good example. If we had to launch, a smart contract for something that's going to be one-time use and it's not going to handle assets, single person writing it can review it. Worst case, it breaks and you redeploy it, right? It's low risk. Something important like, consensus critical code and opgeth or opreth or whatever, depending on what exactly it touches, usually 2 to 3 people. So for example, we recently did a opgeth hardening release, and I think that got reviewed probably closely by 2 people and overall by 3 people, with maybe like a 4th person doing a few sanity checks. So it depends on the type of code where it fits in, and what it touches too. If it's something that touches, code that one person is the expert on, generally their review and then a sanity check is enough. If it's more generic, like third-party code we're maintaining, and it's, I may not be thinking about a certain way that, because it's not my code. I don't own this code base. It's something that I'm working in and modifying and trying to understand as I'm working in it. Then you need a lot more review from other people to make sure, sanity check your assumptions, make sure that you're not missing some, glaring structural issue with the way that the third-party code's organized that the person writing the original code is not familiar with, stuff like that. So depends a lot, but usually 2 to 3 people for anything consensus critical.
Also, our GitHub repositories generally require 2 reviewers on top of the person who submitted the change.
Yeah, any consensus critical repos, not stuff like internal tooling, but anything that affects actual deployments or, daemons, updates to the, user-facing UI, things like that. Those have an enforced review policy before anything gets merged and deployed.
Yeah, I think that review policy is active on all of our repositories.
I think there's a few where it's not, but those are more like experimental. I think like the ZK miner, for example, I don't think we're enforcing because that's still in development and being, actively thrashed around and changed. So but yeah, anything that's shipped to production or is going to be shipped to production soon, those have pretty strict merging policies.
All right. What are your thoughts on the ledger security vulnerability that allows malicious apps to alter ETH transactions without the change being visible on the ledger?
This one's interesting, and it's also a good reminder of the value of separation and isolation. So for anyone not familiar, basically the ledger vulnerability let somebody or let another DApp running in your web browser inject malicious content to be signed into the stream of data that the legitimate DApp that you're currently think you're interacting with is sending to the ledger, this hardware wallet that you have plugged in. And the scary thing is the ledger. So the paradigm is supposed to be whatever you see on the hardware wallet is what you're signing. And nowadays, it used to be simple when it was, do you want to send 100 of this ERC20 to this address? And the ledger knew how to understand that transaction and present it to you. And you could say 100 tokens, it's the right token, it's the right destination address, easy peasy, sign. Now with more complex, and there's a bit of a tangent, but it'll come full circle and make sense. Now with a lot of DApps that have more complex interactions, the ledger device doesn't know, and it's impractical to expect it to know all of these different DApps and how to decode the call data to know what it's actually doing. Even if you decode the call data, it could be doing something malicious under the hood. Like it's not going to be able to simulate the transaction and show you all of the end results. Or in theory, you could do that like what Safe does on a lot of chains, but that's a hard thing to do in like a hardware wallet experience. And so a lot of people with using ledgers, doing complex DeFi stuff are basically just blind signing essentially what gets shown on the device. So that's already bad enough, and there's not really that good of a solution to it. If you want to be really safe, you can use, for example, even if it's just you with one wallet and you don't want other signers involved, you can use a safe on chain to do things, and that's going to let you, confirm that the transaction that you built does exactly what you expect it to do. On some chains, it doesn't support on all chains. I'd like them to add Hemi support in the future, but on some chains, on Ethereum, a few of the other major chains, you can do simulations with something like a tool like Tenderly in the safe to see what the net result is, the net state changes are of the contract call you're making, and you can also independently verify. Because remember, there was the safe exploit which exploited the UI that I think it was, I forgot what exchange it was, but basically it put stuff on the safe UI that was different than what was being signed. And so it made the signers for that exchange think that they were transferring funds to, say, their hot wallet, transferring $1 million to their hot wallet when they were actually transferring $1 billion to the attacker or whatever the amount was. And so, like, no layer, the point I'm trying to make is no layer of the stack is safe. And so the best thing you can do is enforce different security protocols at each layer. And then it's kind of the analogy people use a lot is Swiss cheese. If you have one piece of Swiss cheese, there's holes in it. But if you stack enough pieces of Swiss cheese at different angles together, eventually there's no hole that goes all the way from top to bottom. And cybersecurity, you're never going to be fully secure. There's always potential vulnerabilities. There's always, you could do everything right, and then you use a protocol that had some weird esoteric bug that gets exploited. So there's always things that can happen, but you can mitigate risk substantially when you implement multiple layers of control. And so, for example, with the ledger exploit, it's a good argument for isolation of, at a minimum, whenever you're signing something with a ledger, have it connected to whatever wallet, MetaMask, or Rabby, or whatever you're using, running in its own web browser session where you have just that DApp open. So your browser has a connection to via MetaMask or whatever to your ledger. That's the connection that the malicious DApp would inject data into. If your web browser session, and I've not deep dived into the exact specifics, so I believe this would solve this type of vulnerability if it was something lower level at the, being able to hijack the communication at, the OS level or the kernel level with the device. That would be a slightly different security posture, and then you'd want machine isolation. But I think for the way that vulnerability worked, from my understanding, you could solve that by having a dedicated web browser session where if you're signing something with your ledger, you have one tab open, it is just that site, and it is an entirely isolated, you don't have, it's not just a window, it's an isolated browser session. Or if you want to get a little more extreme, even a isolated version of a browser or sandbox instance of a browser that's communicating with your ledger. And again, if you want to do the ultimate version of it, you have a separate computer and you say, this computer is, I only open one web browser session with one DApp and interact with that at a time. And if I want to switch between DApps that I'm using, I close the browser, reopen it, open the new DApp, reconnect the ledger. And again, nothing's perfect, but if you practice, isolation techniques like that, even if you were to, be using a ledger with a vulnerable version, you're much more secure because the chance of there being a malicious DApp that also has access to that ledger connection in that browser session is eliminated. So it's an interesting find. I think it was a little overstated as far as, like, it's a serious vulnerability for sure. I think it was a bit overstated because it did, the scary part about it, I'll say first, is, which I was getting to and then got off on a tangent. The scary part is the ledger didn't actually show you that you were signing something else. So kind of like that safe thing where the UI showed, you're signing this transaction you expect to be signing. The ledger device itself that you had plugged into the machine that you just sent a command from, Uniswap to or whatever, the thing that you're actually signing on the ledger is different than the thing that you're seeing on the display, rather, is different than what you're actually signing. So it was I'm not sure if it technically qualifies as like a timing attack, but it was an attack basically where you click something that triggers signing of a legitimate transaction you want to sign. That legitimate transaction is what's shown on the ledger. But when you actually sign it, because of this vulnerability, you're actually signing the message the attacker, DApp also sending information to the ledger sent at around the same time. And so you think you're signing a Uniswap transaction, even if you were to pedantically compare, the message hash or whatever that you're signing against the message hash of the interaction that, should have been serialized for what you're doing on chain, you would still be signing the malicious payload, so that part of the vulnerability is really scary because it breaks the usual assumption that what I see on the hardware device, assuming I can understand what's actually displayed, is truly what I'm signing. Even that was broken. So that part's scary, but it does require you to be running another malicious DApp with access to send commands to the ledger. And so it's not just, you use Uniswap and somebody can swoop in and hijack your transaction. It is, you have to actively load a web page serving that a malicious version of a DApp that sends those malicious commands to your ledger while you're also using Uniswap. So it's a fairly contained, it's a hard exploit to execute, and it requires, the user to have that malicious DApp loaded while they're also interacting with a legitimate DApp. But the fact that it signs something different than what's shown on the device itself it violates the usual expectations of what you get with a hardware wallet. So it's interesting, it's scary, and it's a good reminder to use isolation.
All right. Let's see. We have addressed that. Well, if anyone has any further questions, we still have a little time left.
I see a WinMax beard. The answer is never. I can never compete with Jeremy, so I'm not going to try. That was a quick one.
Yeah.
See, I can be concise.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Holy shit.
Oh man.
Oh boy.
What would be cool as an idea for a hackathon would be when we have the ZK Marketplace launched, building like a cool, Hemi-based simple ZK DApp that leverages the marketplace and kind of runs that contract composability pipeline.
We should do that. We should.
Can you ZK prove Jeremy has a better beard and you can't copy it?
You don't even need ZK for that. It's just self-evident. You probably could if you want to get pedantic with the ZK biometric technology. You could probably, if you define a quantifiable beard quality measurement in one of those systems, you theoretically could. Wouldn't that be great? You define the metrics for scoring the best beard with like a ZK biometric program, and then each person who interacts, if they have a better beard than the previous person, they like get to take the tokens from the contract or something.
That would be awesome. That would radically change beauty contests.
It would revolutionize DeFi or beauty contests or something. I don't know. Oh God.
Now there's a theory that Joshua is an AI. Okay.
I think of all the people on the team most likely to be an AI, Josh was probably the lowest on the list.
Yeah. Who would be the top of the list?
Gosh.
Marco?
No, Marco's too much of a character. I don't know.
Does AI like a brisket?
You know what? I'm going to take a wild guess and say AI probably is more of a vegetarian, soylent kind of a vibe.
Yeah, I could see that.
Alpha says I'm the most I'd be the most likely to be AI. That could be the case.
I mean, maybe.
Especially with how wordy AI is now. It's like you ask a simple question, you get 3 pages of answers. I mean, that tracks.
You're not wrong. But you appear live on camera. So
that is true, but there's good deepfake software now.
Shit, that's right.
It's insane. Some of the like originally when all the deepfake stuff came out, I mean, it's been going on for a long time, but 3, maybe 4 years ago when it first started up, and they're like, look, it's Obama giving a speech, and you're like, that, how could anyone fall for that? That we're fine. And then fast forward to now, and you're like, you watch a real video of a politician, you're like, I'm pretty sure that's AI. And then you watch an
Yeah.
AI video, and you're like, finally the legitimate one. It's crazy how good they've gotten in just a couple of years.
It's scary. I remember South Park Studios put out something called Sassy Justice, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. And they're billionaires, so obviously their deep fakes were good even back then, but damn, it's real good.
I think you
You
mentioned
can
that
find it
before.
on
I have to
YouTube.
check that out. I think I wrote it down on one of my infinite lists of things to eventually come back to, and then it got promptly lost.
Oh boy, I mean, this is certainly a question. Yeah, we can close out with this one. What is the best part of mathematics? Can I answer first? I'm
Go
gonna
for
say
it.
I'm gonna say addition.
I
All
was
right,
going to go for multiplication, but addition is a strong contender, sir.
perfect.
This we should ask this when John's on. JCD would have some strong thoughts on this.
Very
Uh,
strong opinions and a lot of F words about this one.
for blockchain specifically, I mean, there's still so many options. You have all of the math used for ZK, and even there's a couple different branches of math used, and that even differs between the type of ZK system, whether it's something like a pairing based snarg like Groth 16, or something with the way that Starks are designed with, those are a little more. Starks are actually, oddly enough, even though they're more complicated and more complicated to prove the safety of, ignoring, quantum, but just as a general rule, because there's more moving pieces. They're actually, I'd say, probably a little simpler, because a lot of them are, at the end of the day, it's hash-based construction. Then you layer Fiat Shamir on top of it, and you do some smart optimizations. That one's tricky. I'm also not a mathematician by any means, or even close. I learn what I need to learn for a particular problem that I want to solve, and then I move on. Maybe the most broadly useful in kind of I mean, I'd have to say statistics is up there, because there's just so many interesting ways to use it. Like, even statistics just shows up everywhere. Whenever you want to do anything in the real world, it seems like you stumble across a need for statistics. So, for example, with like HBit VM, uh, it would seem like the kind of thing where it's okay. You're doing ZK proofs. You're doing, you have a proof of work and a proof of stake system. There's, signature algorithms, signature verification involved, whatever. But when you really look into it, a lot of HBit VM, like the way to securely parameterize, so the way to implement the protocol itself of how does data shuffle around, and what do you prove, and what do you validate at what step, and how does it correlate with other data, all of that is just, not easy, but it's linear. We have Bitcoin doing this thing over here, Ethereum doing this thing over here, Hemi running from DA data published to Ethereum here, and then derived here to have this Bitcoin attributes deposited transaction here, which drives the Bitcoin state to change here, which gives us this view of Bitcoin here, which correlates, in a mapping basically that you could create of Ethereum blocks to the Hemi chain derived from it, to the view of Bitcoin in that, to Ethereum data published to Bitcoin that's exposed in that view, and it kind of completes the full cycle, and you can compare the right pieces of data together. But then all of a sudden, so that seems like the hard part, which it is a hard part. But then you get to parameterization of, what are these worst case scenarios of what can happen in Ethereum consensus power? Like, what happens if 2/3 of Ethereum consensus power goes offline for 2 days because of a giant, global network interconnectivity problem? What if Bitcoin's hash rate goes down 50%, and you have to wait a period of time for the difficulty adjustment to be able to kick Bitcoin back up to producing blocks every 10 minutes? What are the worst case probabilities with 96 nines of probability that at least X number of Bitcoin blocks are going to be produced within a segment of X number of Ethereum blocks? And so those sorts of things, it's all relatively simple statistics, but it's one of those things that a lot of times when you design a system, you end up having to a blockchain with game theory, with trading and analyzing. Obviously, with trading, it's a lot of statistics and probabilities, but it's one of those things that it's kind of boring, but it's so ubiquitous, and it rears its head in all kinds of places where it seems like you just have this sort of deterministic protocol design, and then boom, you got to think about edge cases, and now you have a statistics problem. So, short answer, I don't know. Let's ask JCV next week. I'm sure he has some much stronger opinions and much more insightful ideas than I do.
I'm very excited to hear JCV's take on this.
I don't know if he's technically a mathematician, but he has, I want to say, a master's in mathematics, which I'm going to qualify as a mathematician. Hell,
I would fucking say so.
I think that qualifies.
Yeah, like if it doesn't, then what does?
Yeah, PhD doing active research. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like
he's the closest, and I would qualify JCV as a mathematician. I think that's a fair assessment. I, on the other hand, I'm not. I am a engineer who has to use math to do things.
All right. Well, let's see. Oh, Alpha just said, "Oh hell," but you know what? That's a good outro for this session. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are at the top of the hour, so we are going to wrap things up. Just a reminder, you can catch us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. EDT. I really hope we get rid of daylight savings.
Just as a side note, I could have sworn we got rid of daylight savings time like 5 years ago. I distinctly remember reading a news article that Congress voted to get rid of daylight savings time, and I thought, oh, problem solved. Whatever happened to that? Like now we're back doing it for a third time.
I remember, but it never happened. It just like they brought it up. People got
voted
excited.
on it. Everyone got excited because we're getting rid of it. Nothing for 3 years. And then they step in and say, like, states can't do it independently. So now a state can't even go in autonomously, just be like, screw it, I'm getting rid of it myself. Now, right, kind of makes sense. I get it, but now you have to wait for the federal government, and we know how that goes.
Yeah. So our luck, they'll just make everything daylight savings. They'll just add more.
Yeah. Well, every quarter it'll just shift an hour, 30 minutes, because it more closely approximates the change in daylight availability. Oh, hell, we should just bump it like 3 minutes every day. Why not?
I mean, why not? Why not at this point? I mean, if we're doing that, though, I really think we need to adjust the month thing, too, because I think I've brought this up before, but February really pisses me off that it has 28 days and sometimes 29. Like,
yeah.
Can't you just take one from the months that have 31 and we just call it a day? I'm sure there's some mathematical reason why you can't.
I don't think there's a math reason. I think it's some. I'm not a. Whenever I talk about history, don't believe anything I say. But I think there was a thing where one of the Roman leaders, there was some conflict with. So I think July is like Julius or something. It's like related to him or his month or something like that. Again, don't quote me on any of this. But I think there was a thing where February used to have, I want to say 30 days, and then some ruler's month only had 30 days as well, and they wanted it to be 31, so they stole a month from February, and then someone else did too. There was something like that happened. So I don't think there's a good mathematical reason. I think there's not like the calendar has to work this way in order for us to, whatever. It's more like some asshole stole a day from February, and then somebody did it again, kind of a thing.
It's just petty, dickish Roman people.
Yeah, that we're still dealing with. I think that's the root cause. Don't quote me, but I think that's true.
if that is the root cause, that's really upsetting because honestly, the people who have like the leap year birthdays and they're like, I'm only 6. It's like you're 40.
I
Like,
was going to bring that up too. There's always I think almost everybody knows somebody who was born on the 29th who's like turning 40 and they're talking about, man, I can't wait till I can drive. And you're like, dude, shut up.
yeah, seriously, I just want to slap
It
the
was funny the
shit out of
first
this
100
guy.
times.
Right. It was funny when we were 6, like when we were both actually 6, you know?
Yeah.
Not
We were
now.
both
You're
4 and you
claiming
were
to be
able to say
8.
you haven't had a birthday yet. That was funny. But we were
Right.
also 4 and eating crayons. Okay.
Right. Well, anyway, I digress. You can catch us every week at 11 a.m. for Midweek with Max. Every other week on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. EDT for Protocol Engineering office hours. Stay tuned to the Hemi Discord for some exciting announcements regarding Season 2 of the Hemi Arcade Game Contest, as well as our Capture the Flag event that will be happening um, in the next month-ish or so. I don't want to say soon and steal your thunder, so I'm just going to say month-ish.
Let's
And
say probably hopefully in October. That's
ho
October is the target. Where exactly in
hopefully
October?
October.
We're figuring that out.
Yeah, it's
I
a
do
work
also
in
want
progress.
to. Joshua had a great comment. I just wanted to share. We were talking about the calendar, and I blamed Julius Caesar for stealing a day, which I think it might have been somebody else, but Joshua commented, "Why do you think he was stabbed 23 times?"
That would
Which I'm
do
going
it.
to say is a valid response to stealing a day because your ego demands that your month has 31 days.
Seriously. Honestly, they should have stabbed him 28 times and sometimes 29.
And then come back every 4 years and stab the body 29 times instead.
Exactly.
Oh
All
God.
right. Well, anyway, that'll do it for this week's session of oh God, that's gonna kill me. Of Hemi Protocol Office. I can't even talk now. God damn it. Well, they broke me. I'm done with outros. Max, if you want to say anything otherwise, I'm just gonna shut up.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's it. Appreciate everyone for joining us and chatting about different engineering stuff, what we're working on at Hemi, ideas for future Hemi arcade games, Grants Bounty program. We do want to formalize that more in the future, so not sure when exactly, but it's on the endless list of things to do that we do want to at some point get figured out here. So that all said, I think we have a built on Hemi. I don't know the exact time, but I'm sure it's on Twitter.
It is definitely on Twitter. You know what? Let me pull up the old Twitter real quick and see if I can figure it out. Oh my God, Tim Curry just passed away.
Who?
That's horrible.
Who was it?
Tim Curry just passed away. That's terrible news. He was
Oh, the
he's
actor.
in a lot
Okay.
of he's in a lot of good stuff. Clue, Legend, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, the
Oh,
Rocky
we
Horror
lost
Picture Show.
Dolly Parton and Tim Curry in the same week. Damn.
Yeah, that's awful. Ugh. Well, that's a downer. Jesus.
Well, on that uplifting note,
Yeah. Shit. Be safe, hug your pets, and be nice to people. And I'll see you next time. Fuck.
all right. Well, we'll see everyone either the Built on Hemi that Jeremy's hosting this week or on Midweek with Max next week. So appreciate everyone showing up, and we will see you then.